Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Here we have a Vienna. I have loads of videos on my channel in the Vienna, and a full Vienna course if you're interested. And my opponent plays knight c6, known as the Max Lang defense. After knight f6 we can go for the Vienna Gambit with f4, but here we can go bishop to c4, apply immediate pressure to f7, which can pay off in the future, and also just gets the bishop developed, of course, and secures a lot of control over d5. My opponent, however, goes bishop to c5, which is one of the craziest lines in this opening, actually. And it doesn't look like it, because you might be saying, well, just something like d3 or knight to f3, maybe you can build for f4. But no, the move is actually queen to g4. And we say, okay, you can, get your bishop developed. That's all very well and good. But you are abandoning your g7 pawn. And also, if my queen gets to g7, you have to watch out for f7 as well. So you can't play something like knight to f6, inviting queen g7 to go rook to g8, because I have queen to f7 mate. Now, that would be good if I didn't have queen to f7 mate. I'd have to move my queen. You could take on g2. Something along those lines. You could counterattack on f2. That would be great. But my bishop on c4 is so strong, attacking this weak f7 square, that you can't get away with it. And yeah, there's a few moves for black here. King to f8 is a move, just defending g7. And it looks very ugly because, let's be honest, it is a very ugly move, but it's playable. You can go g6, just stopping my queen from attacking g7. But of course, you can see, especially with the bishop over here, that would cause some holes on the dark squares. My opponent, however, goes queen to f6, which is the most natural move. You defend g7, you defend f7, and you counterattack on f2. So you might be thinking, okay, well, then we just go knight to h3, we defend f2, and then we can build up for knight to d5, right? Which looks very nice. Well, no, because black here has a threat. Well, he has two threats. His first threat is queen takes f2 check. His second threat is pawn to d5, hitting my bishop and hitting my queen. So knight d5 is the move. And this is a really complicated position. This is one of my favorite lines in the Vienna. And I don't have like all of it memorized, but you basically go, okay, no d5 for you, because I'm going to be on the d5 square. So we solve that problem. And you know what? You can come and take on f2. I'm going to sacrifice the pawn. I'm going to give up my castling rights. But how are you going to deal with all of these threats, right? Also, the queen, it doesn't have many squares, right? I'm building up for the move knight to h3, right? Hitting this queen. And I think it becomes relatively clear that the queen actually doesn't have that many squares to go to, right? We're controlling all the squares on the f-file, bar f2. We are also controlling f1, which is crucial. Otherwise, queen to f1 would be mate, so be very careful. We're also controlling e3. You can't take on g2. So your only other safe square is d4. And there's often times where you can play like knight h3, queen d4, d3, securing the light squares, and then just play c3 and trap the queen in many lines, right? So black not only has to be very careful about his king's safety, but also the safety of his queen. Okay, knight to f6. I don't think that's a good move. I think black needs to play a move like king to f8. I think h5 is also a move. g6 is probably a move. Yeah, there's some weird lines, actually. Oh, no, I think you start with king to f8. Because if I take on g7, there is a massive problem. So obviously the point is, if I take on f6, then I assume the queen will take, guard everything, black is up a pawn, and I have no threat. And also d5 is on the way, right? So taking doesn't really make any sense. We could take on c7, but after king to d8, my queen and my knight are both hanging, so that's also no good. I also have to ensure that f1 remains protected, because otherwise queen to f1 will be checkmate, right? I believe I'm supposed to take on g7, and this is a very good rule of thumb in this opening. In the I wouldn't say the majority of cases, but in many, many cases, if you can take on g7, you should. Because the queen also maintains defense of g2, which is clearly very useful. And yeah, rook to g8 doesn't work. It looks like it works. It doesn't work. Can you see why? Can you see why? Well, the rook is defended by the knight. So let's take the knight. With check, mind you. Also, the queen just can't take, because it's defended by our queen. And you can see just how complicated this opening is, right? This is a little bit of a less resilient approach from black. There were definitely better ways to go about it, but I'll explore some of these lines in the analysis because they are pretty fascinating. By the way, if you are enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. Yeah. I thought I pronounced that wrong, but I pronounced it correctly. Okay, yes, king to e7. I think knight takes makes a lot of sense because it comes with check. Oh wait, could I take here? Yeah, I probably could. I mean, it's all winning, realistically. It's all winning. King back here. Yeah, I mean, queen to g5 check is a move. I could even play pawn to d4, preparing bishop to g5 check, which is maybe even better. And like I said, the knight on d5 is incredibly strong, and black just can't get away with a move like knight to f6. I mean, this is 6 moves into the game, and I think black is just already lost here. A more resilient approach might have been to take on d5 and bait me into taking, because I can't take with the bishop because of mate. That might have been a slightly better way to go about it. Okay, king d8, don't blunder your queen. As tempting as that move is, because it would otherwise deliver checkmate. As I said, we could give a check here, but I mean, black can probably just block. Also, f6 does exist. I kind of like the look of the move d4, though, because black has no checks on my king, and we are also hitting the bishop. So if d4, bishop e7, I think we can still go bishop to g5. And if bishop takes, we have queen to f8 mate. So this looks very good to me. Again, I'm ensuring that this is defended. I'm also ensuring this is defended, right? I'm being very, very careful about those two squares. Okay, my opponent takes with a knight, obviously threatening something like this. But it's too little, too late. Queen g5, sorry, not queen g5. Bishop g5 check. And everything is completely winning here. If bishop to e7, we can take king e8 and mate. If f6, we can just take, and the same thing happens. You can move the king. For some reason, I didn't really consider that, but obviously we can just give a check. Like this. Also disconnecting the queen from the f7 pawn. The king has 2 different squares. Both of them walk straight into the line of the bishop, and my opponent resigns because the game is about to end. There's going to be mate in a couple of moves. And yeah, a very interesting game. Hopefully this shows why the Vienna is so good. Like, it's not only incredibly strong, but also just incredibly interesting. Like, if you look at my other Vienna games on my channel, you will see just how interesting the opening is, right? Like, I love it. I love it. And I play it at like a 2200 level online with very, very good success. So let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so a very nice 98.1% accuracy. I think there's a good chance I put that in the thumbnail. And 65.4 for my opponent. So, okay, of course we have the Vienna with knight to c3. Like I said, I've got so many Vienna games on my channel and a full Vienna course if you're interested. And after like knight to f6, we can go for the Vienna Gambit with pawn to f4, and you can get some very, very nice lines. Like, for example, black cannot take because e5, the knight can't move forwards because we control all of its squares. The knight has to go back, and then, of course, we get a very nice lead in development. This f4 pawn is not going to last very long. We'll play d4 and take it very quickly. You could even sacrifice like both pawns in some lines. Something like this, you can take with a knight. You can also just castle and let black have the 2 extra pawns. This isn't necessarily the best line, but it's kind of an interesting one. But knight c6, we go bishop to c4. One of the better lines for black here is knight to f6, and after d3 preparing f4, black has the very nice move knight to a5, and immediately going after the bishop. You'll get different recommendations from different people. Some people like queen to f3, some people like knight g to e2. The idea being that you give the bishop up and clamp down on the d5 square. You can see black is never playing d5. I don't like that line personally. I like to keep the pawns together. So after oh my god. Why? Okay, here, yeah. After knight to a5, I recommend bishop b3. Allow this trade, open up the rook, and we still build up for f4 anyway. So I quite like this. But my opponent goes bishop c5. You can see the evaluation swings our way a bit after the move queen to g4. Now you might be asking, well, why can't black just go queen g5? Right? It's the exact same thing but in reverse. Now remember what I said earlier on in the video. I said having the bishop on c4 is what makes everything tick. Because in this line, you can't play the normal knight to f6, because after queen g7, you don't have rook to g8 because of mate. Right? If my bishop wasn't on c4, then that wouldn't be the case. I'd have to move my queen, and black would be completely winning because of this. Right? Or just taking on g2. So, the reason black can't go queen g5 is because I just go knight f3. And after queen takes, rook g1, queen h3, I have bishop takes f7, and if king takes, then I win the queen. Right? So black can't do that because he needs the bishop on c5 to help the queen out. And we have that, so we can play queen to g4. Hopefully that makes sense. My opponent plays queen f6, which is one of the main lines. It's a good line for white, but it's also the most natural move for black. The better move is king to f8, which is obviously very unnatural. Point being that white can't play a move like knight to f3 because d5 is a big threat, right? So white normally plays queen to g3 or queen to f3. No, I think queen to f3 is the main line. And after something like, no, that threatens mate. What am I on about? If queen to f6, you get knight to d5. Of course, if knight d5 here, then we just deliver checkmate. So something like knight to f6, knight g to e2, pawn d6. Don't allow this, by the way. I always like to play h3 in these positions so that this can't be played. And this is just a very comfortable position for white, in my opinion. You know, something like d3, you can castle kingside, bring the bishop out, even to g5. It's very, very nice. My opponent goes queen to f6, and the only real good move is knight d5. Now, we could play queen to g3, defending the mate threat and getting out of this. But this is obviously way more passive. Black will just go knight g to e7 and castle, and black is absolutely fine here. We have very little to show. So knight d5, we invite the queen to take on f2. Any other move loses on the spot. If you go back, then of course we'll take on g7. We have way too many threats. Black needs to counterattack, so he does. King d1, and as I said, king to f8 is the only move here. You have to defend g7 and ensure this doesn't come with check. And here, the line is like knight to h3, and if queen d4, like I was saying, then pawn d3 and c3 is a massive threat to just win the queen, right? You can have some weird lines with like knight to f6, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop h6, and this is obviously just very, very bad for black. You can see how quickly it can just become completely untenable, right? We're winning f7 here, for example. And black's best idea is to tuck the king on d8. I mean, this is game over. So my opponent goes knight to f6, and this just doesn't work. And I mean, to be fair, any other move apart from this is completely losing. The second best move, for example, for white is queen g5, which just won't do. Because after knight takes d5, we can't take with a bishop because of mate. Remember, that's very important. So we have to take with a pawn. Knight e7, if we take, then I mean rook g8, and we're getting slaughtered because our bishop can no longer see f7. Because the pawn has to take, because the bishop can't take, so it needs to defend. So we have to take on g7. Here, taking on d5 is definitely the best attempt to fight back. And after queen takes h8, if king e7, we basically can't take the knight because of queen takes g2. So we have to play queen to g8, defending g2. allowing this knight to move and get out of the way. But of course, f7 could become very weak. So that's definitely the more resilient approach, to take on d5 and give up the rook. My opponent, however, goes rook to g8. And as I said, that just won't do. Knight takes f6. This is completely losing, right? Everything is hanging. King e7. Knight takes g8 check. King to d8. And here I play d4, which is the best move. And there's way too many threats on the board. My opponent takes with the knight. You could take with the queen, delivering a check. So I don't have time for this just yet. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, I just drop back. And, like, how are you stopping this? h6 is the computer's favorite move, which we can obviously just take. Right? Like, that's not difficult. We can take, and, I mean, what... The computer wants to give up the queen. Like, it's really bad. But knight takes, bishop g5 check. King e8, knight f6 check, and my opponent resigns because he either gives up the queen, or he plays king e7, allows this because the knight disconnects the queen from f7. We deliver more checks, king goes back, knight h5 check. I mean, there's some kind of mate forming very, very quickly, and this is the computer's chosen checkmate, which is kind of pretty, right? So, yeah, as I said, my opponent resigns after knight to f6. 12 move win, that's not bad. 98.1% accuracy, not bad. Every move explained. Hopefully this helps you. Hopefully you found this entertaining. If you want to check out my full Vienna course and learn the Vienna for yourself, including the line that we just played, check out this video up here. And if you already play the Vienna, it's just a good way to try to book up and see where you might be missing some ideas. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.